In this video, Chinese professor and internet sensation Professor Jiang breaks down the problems affecting Canadians today and why these problems may lead into a possible Canadian collapse. And he explains why these problems are not happening by mistake, but are all by design.
The major increase is in housing prices. Okay, so Canada these past 5 years has seen a huge influx of immigrants, and this has caused housing prices to skyrocket. The United States, which has a much larger economy than Canada, the housing prices are pretty stable. You can still afford to buy a house if you're a young person in the United States, not in Canada. Okay, you see this huge spike in Canada. The housing prices are now unaffordable. This is a chart that shows you economic growth as compared to housing prices. So as you can see in the United States, housing prices, there's a correlation between income and housing prices. Okay? This is pretty reasonable. In Canada, it is not reasonable. Okay? So GDP, housing prices is growing like this, but housing prices is just skyrocketing. And that's why Canadians feel as though the Canadian dream of one day having their own house, it's basically dead. So one strange thing is that as Canada lets in more immigrants, and as property prices go up, you would think that they would build more and more houses. But as you can see, housing supply, it's pretty flat, even though immigration is going up. Does anyone know why this would be the case? Why is it that you have a policy of letting in more immigrants, but you don't have a policy of building more housing for them? That's kind of strange, right? Can anyone guess why that would be?
Money, I guess.
Yeah, that's exactly correct, okay? So policy is not being controlled by what's best for the nation and the people. It's controlled by vested interests that will make money off the process, right? So as you say, real estate developers can make money off this process, but the people who benefit the most are actually property owners, right? So if you already have a house, if the supply is constant but the demand goes up, then you know from economics class that the value of a house increases artificially. So it's making homeowners very happy. Okay? And that's why you have this crisis in Canada. The other issue that's really problematic in the Western world is that as the number of immigrants goes up, Native people, the Native population, they're not having children. Okay, so this is Canada, where the birth rate, okay, the blue is the birth rate, okay, it's steadily going down, whereas immigrants are going up. So it's the immigrants who provide most of the new people in Canada. In fact, right now, 25%, a quarter of all Canadians are first-generation immigrants. First-generation Canadians, meaning that they're immigrants to the country. And if you just look at this trend, in 40 years' time, 50 years' time, there'll be very few white Canadians in Canada. And this is causing a lot of conflict and tension in the country. So you have these huge issues. Housing is unaffordable. Inflation is going up. Ethnic tensions are increasing. But the Canadian government still insists on increasing the number of immigrants in the country. Okay? There's no policy rollback where like, you know what, let's have a moratorium. Clearly, our policy is too rapid, and we need to slow things down. In fact, as you can see, they're actually going to ramp up the process. The goal for Canada, right now the Canadian population is about 35 to 40 million people. They want 100 million people in Canada by the year 2100. And guess what? The majority of these people are going to come from India and probably China. Okay? And as we discussed, the percentage of immigrants as part of the total population, it's just rapidly increasing. So in Australia, it's almost a third now. In Canada, it's a quarter. In Germany, it's a fifth. And these percentages will go up and up and up, leading to more and greater ethnic tension and immigrant protests within these countries. As you can see, the number of immigrants coming from India far surpasses that of other countries, okay? And these are just legal immigrants. We're not counting in students. So there are millions and millions of Indian students right now in Canada on student visas. And they're looking for a path to permanent residency, to citizenship. And that's what leads to situations like this, okay? You have these viral videos online where you have thousands and thousands of Indian students lining up for hours and hours because they're applying for a minimum wage job at a restaurant or at a store. Life for these Indian students is just terrible. A lot of them live 8 to a room. Okay? There's one room that was meant for one person. There are now 8 students living in that room. At the same time, what's really interesting is that the Indians are now an extremely powerful political force in Canada. This was the former Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, meeting with representatives of the Indian community because he depends on them for his votes. In last year's federal election, 22 Indian people of Indian descent were elected to parliament, okay? So in parliament, there's 243 seats. 22 of them now are Indian. How many Chinese? How many MPs of Chinese origin? There are less than 10. So even though the Chinese have been there longer, and even though they're actually the more numerous Chinese than Indians, the Indians are an extremely powerful political force. And a lot of it is because Indians come from democracy, so they're very good at debate. They're very good at organizing. They're very good at collective action. And that's what leads them to excel in the Canadian political system. At the same time, we can imagine that if current trends continue, if the immigrant population from India increases, and if the Indians continue to amass more political power, there could be a situation where the Indians take over the Canadian government in like 20 or 40 years' time. So there's a real risk that in Canada, that their native population gets replaced by the Indians. And this is happening elsewhere as well. All right, okay. That's a great question, okay? So immigrants are suffering, but actually the local population is suffering even more. Because as we discussed last class, the economy is declining, and it's pretty rapid decline. So it's harder for young people to find jobs, especially with immigrants coming into the country, right? Prices are very expensive nowadays. So it's very hard for young people to live and work in big cities. So as these immigrants are coming into the country, they're putting tremendous pressure on the local population. And that's why there's so much ethnic tension throughout the Western world right now. Okay? So this leads us to a paradox. If immigrants are making life worse for everyone, especially young people, who's the future of these nations, why is this happening? Okay? So I want you guys to keep this in the back of your mind. You probably know the answer already because you know how property prices work, right? Okay.
Canada is currently heading towards an inevitable fall. The fall of Canada is inevitable, and it was designed to happen this way. Though somebody may not see, it just seems like a very slight issue, something like lack of jobs. That is something that is being experienced not just in Canada. Somebody may say that also people from France are experiencing lack of jobs. Lack of jobs is a global problem. Jobs are always inadequate. Somebody may argue that way, but I'd urge you to remember that Canada is a first world country above everything. And according to statistics that do help us to project in the future, or do help us get future projections, which Professor Jiang has shown us, projecting in the next 20 to 40 years, Canada is likely to face an immigrant takeover fully. Canadians will be the minorities. And I'm not talking about this because I do support it. Neither am I talking about it because I am in total disagreement. That is the inevitable ending. And I know, as much as it is a very hard conversation to have, I believe we should have such kind of conversations, because it's through such conversations that we get to have or to experience any change. Well, you've heard it from the professor, and he has broken it down very well. The problem begins with the TFW program, which is the Temporary Foreign Worker Program. But what leads to, or what led to the government adopting this program in the first place? Originally, Canadians had a very low birth rate, of which it's still the case to this day. So, to some extent, we cannot blame the government of that day for introducing the temporary foreign worker program, because honestly, Canadians, they're having or experiencing a very low birth rate. And while the birth rate is low, the number of immigrants coming in is prone to be higher. And these immigrants are coming in to take the jobs that were supposed to be taken by these Canadians, who probably are not multiplying in the rate that is expected for a country to grow. For a country to grow, it's not just all about resources, but it's also about manpower. So Canada was left with the option of importing workmanship, and that's what exactly they did. They got workers from third world countries, workers from Africa, workers from India, workers from Asia, and we cannot blame Canadians for having a low birth rate. Remember, people only give birth with a plan. It's planned. Okay, the whole thing is planned. You don't just give birth the way probably you'd wish to, and this is because of the economy. Canada or Canadians are experiencing very tough times economically, and even whatever is happening right now, some people are terming it as hyperinflation. People can no longer afford life as they used to, like 20 years ago. All of a sudden, buying groceries has become a luxury in Canada. So many people cannot secure jobs. So many Canadians, as we speak right now, cannot pay their rent. And remember, Canada is a first world country, or so people think. So Canada being a first world country is a first world country to some Canadians, talk of the political class. But to the normal Canadian citizen, Canada is now becoming or turning into a third world country. So the problem begins with the cost of living. Canadians cannot afford to raise more kids, so they opt to have probably one child or two, or even none. People are going childless simply because they cannot afford to have children. The problem is not just having children, there's also taking care of the child thereafter. So there's high cost of living, which leads Canadians to not having children or not having so many children, and that creates a labor deficit in the Canadian labor market or in the Canadian job market, and that leads employers to seek for foreign aid or for temporary foreign workers to come into Canada. And the temporary foreign worker program, which is being misused, I've talked about that in the channel, leads to mass immigration, or leads to so many immigrants coming into Canada. And those immigrants, take for example the Indian immigrants coming into Canada, some are coming for study reasons, some are coming for job reasons, but either way, I've also talked about those who are coming in to study or into universities. It's because Canadian universities have proven that they cannot be sustained financially without admitting foreign students. Anyway, so when they come in, they are coming into Canada, and they come in with their third world habits. So even in Canada, the rate at which Indians are multiplying is higher than the rate at which Canadians are multiplying. So looking at future projections, it is inevitable that Indians will someday take over Canada and probably form the Republic of Canada. And they talk about it even in open spaces. Professor Jiang has mentioned about how Indians are currently having representation in the Canadian Parliament, which I'm not against. They should have representation, or they have earned it. It's not like they got in there through dubious means, but they earned their seats or their political seats the same way a Canadian politician did earn. But this is not even a prophecy, but it's something that is meant to happen. Someday, not so far away from now, Canada will experience an immigrant takeover. Not saying that it's bad, but that's what is prone to happen. Anyway, that is just what I think, please. I'd really want to know what your thoughts are concerning all this that's going on in Canada. Please tell me what your thoughts are, and I'd be really glad to read your comments in the comment section. Tell me what your thoughts are. I do read all the comments and make sure I reply to most of the comments, if not all of them. Yeah, otherwise, let's have the conversation. Let's keep the talk going. It's through having such talks and such discussions that we get to experience change. Do you think Canada will fall? Do you think there is a way out of this? Tell me, and I'll be really glad to have that conversation with you. Otherwise, I am your presenter, Kachina, and as usual, if at all you enjoyed the video, then please do not forget to give it a thumbs up, and also consider supporting this channel by subscribing. And thank you to all those subscribers or all those fans who always come back to this channel to watch another video. Thank you so much. It really means a lot, the support that I'm getting on this channel. Otherwise, I hope to be seeing you in the next video. Until then, please have a good time.